Thank you, Dr. Holmes, and thank you all for coming. It's very exciting to be here. First, I would like to thank Dr. Jane Snyder, the research chair for my dissertation, who was a very strong, consistent force throughout the process in all aspects, and particularly instrumental in assisting me in analyzing the findings. Dr. Stephen Poser, who has been a support throughout, helped me to find clarity in the presentation of the methodology. I've received a lot of support from the CMPS community and want to express special gratitude and appreciation to Drs. Fishbein and Kroll. A fortunate outcome of preparing for this conference over the past few months has been my connection with Dr. Sheftel. It's been a real pleasure sharing thoughts and ideas in this process. Dr. Sayers, you're the tops, and I'm very grateful to you. After a lot of research, I have come to the clear clinical opinion that my husband, Steve Rothman, is a mensch. And he's also the PowerPoint guy. My daughter, Lily, who just arrived from college, is a joy and an inspiration to me. Her grandfather, my father, Harvey Goodman, was a graduate of the center and would have been absolutely thrilled to be here. This paper reflects a long path of learning and exploring, and I'd like to take you along with me. I've been involved at CMPS for 30 years, and of course I was very young when I began. As a second-generation modern psychoanalyst, it's really been longer. With the modern psychoanalytic treatment techniques developed by Dr. Hyman Spotnitz as my foundation, I've developed as an analyst over many years and treated a wide range of patients. Although I studied theory along the way, my theoretical mind really came alive when I began to work directly with Dr. Meadow, and in particular when we worked together on my control case during my certificate training and afterward. She encouraged my natural inclination to view my patient's symptoms in relations to areas of bottled up energy, to track body communications as a way to sharpen the unspoken picture of their internal conflicts. The title of my control case was A Woman Who Chronically Misses Opportunities for Fulfillment. I grew to understand the case in terms of her attempts at controlling stimulation, blocking off energy, experiencing terrifying impressions, and in her wish for a blissful merger. I developed an understanding of how unintegrated primitive drive energy can overwhelm and attack the system, inhibiting the ability to function productively, leaving her trapped in a primitive web where psyche and soma blend. In my countertransference experience, an image emerged from the patient, which then became a metaphor for her engagement with the world. The image was the aperture of a camera, which controls the flow of light in and out. It reflected how she closed off stimulation in her contact with the outside world, causing her, as she described it, to miss magic moments. This enabled her to avoid the risk of disturbing a fragile, homeostatic inner life. Dr. Meadows' drive-inspired conceptions tapped into my visual nature. Throughout the span of our work together, she gravitated to a particular theorist who found language to describe the earliest moments of psychic life and development of mental structure. As I read Eugenio Gaddini, Joyce McDougall, Andre Green, and others, I was excited and inspired by their work and found that their presentations resonated deeply in me. They stimulated and expanded my frame of reference with their brilliant elaboration of early mental states and the evolution of psychic functioning with an emphasis on the drives. I tend to understand my patients visually and viscerally. I picture their inner life in terms of energy blocked off and try to allow an image or association to come to mind, which helps me to create some understanding. As I advanced to the doctoral level, following Dr. Meadows' roadmap, I was determined to develop a psychoanalytic research project that would incorporate my interest in descriptions of early psychic life and reflect my natural clinical inclinations. While I have treated a wide range of patients, some very clinically challenging, I started to focus on patients who have severe somatic issues that coincide with remote, unreachable, and seemingly immovable presentations in the treatment. My thesis began to emerge. I frequently had the sense that these patients were holding on to their bodies for dear life as a last line of defense against potentially overwhelming levels of stimulation. I noted their particularly pronounced psychic rigidity and the very limited space within their minds to process and organize stimulation in the form of thoughts and feelings. This enabled them to maintain a tolerable tension level, which appeared to coincide with the nullifying of ego function. I find it notable that in many of these patients, there is an absence of prominent observable symptoms, and it reminds me of the idea of negative space in art. Meanwhile, as the quest for a viable research format went on for years, I was continuing to treat these patients. Maybe I was even helping them to stay alive. And through the years, I noted some special challenges in working with them where extra emphasis is placed on sensorial and vigilant listening. And I became more aware of specific potential dangers for the analyst, which I will shed light on later. As a backdrop for my work, I'd like to present a brief review of literature. Joyce McDougall states that patients who experience a threat to their psychic survival or equilibrium are inclined to keep affect out of the realm of experience, block access to a free range of thought, and reveal little spontaneous fantasy. The analyst, she suggests, struggles to find some resonance within a sparse, barren psychic world. This level of psychic functioning relates to what Eugenio Guidini described as anxiety of loss of self, a moment during early life, somewhere between merger and the first glimpse of separateness, when any movement towards separation is experienced as a potential danger to one's existence. In this state, there is an overpowering need to maintain a static or limited sphere in order to protect the integrity of the psyche. As Guidini stated, the more unbearable the recognition of one's own separateness, the more overwhelming the integrative processes are. If one remains stuck due to a traumatic experience of separation during early development, one may continue to use the body as a receptacle for affective release, as an archaic self-object connection, and the only self-protective device the fragmentary self is capable of producing. Any thrust toward change is experienced as a threat to survival. This can also account for the potential threat to psychic equilibrium from movement or progress in treatment. Guidini noted that the development of fantasy appears to begin with fantasies expressed through bodily functioning. These fantasies of the body precede the development of fantasy associated with an image. At this point, there is no clear distinction between self, body, and object boundaries, and archaic fantasies are incorporated into the primitive psychic mechanism. His ideas relate to a consistent impression I have of how my patients function. They utilize their bodies as a last line of defense against an overwhelming influx of stimulation from both internal and external sources. McDougall emphasizes throughout her work that the archaic psychic structure may be insufficient to withstand threatening affects and may contribute to a vulnerability to somatic disorganization. Patients with such structures may be excluded from more evolved forms of mental representation and affect recognition and resort to somatic or other means. McDougall has also noted that in these primitive states, The symptoms are signs, not symbols, and follow somatic, not psychic laws. This phenomenon is a critical factor in the treatment of patients for whom words don't resonate in a meaningful way. The cases in my study exhibit a primitive level of symbolism, where the symptoms express a baseline core conflict that is deeply buried. These are to be distinguished from a hysterical symptom reflecting a higher level of development. The body does the thinking while revealing a primitive pre-object conflict and contributes to the common experience of analysts who work with primitive patients that there appears to be little or no movement or progress in the treatment process. Beginning in the 1950s, Pierre Marty and his colleagues at the Paris School of Psychosomatics set forth a clear distinction of somatic medicine from the traditional psychological mooring. They moved it toward an economic viewpoint in which psychosomatics became a distinct psychoanalytic discipline. It rested in Freud's metapsychology, underscoring the core ideas of drive, transference, affect, and representation. They developed a concept called operational living, a comprehensive, multifaceted view of particular psychosomatic patients. Operational living emphasizes a concrete way of thinking, confined to facts and events of actual life, cut off from their emotional and symbolic roots.